begin this meeting by taking public comment on agenda items. I want to invite the staff to identify any folks who have asked to be recognized during this section of the meeting to offer public testimony.
All right, thank you very much. We do have several speakers. The first speaker I have as relates to public comments on agenda item, Mr. Mark Mustin on agenda item number 601, followed directly behind Jerry C. on agenda item number 501. Please, if you would come to the podium, state your name, address for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'm Mark Mustin. It's nice to be here. The new digs, you guys seem to redecorate kind of with some frequency, but it looks really good. So I will. I'm here on the item about the CRA downtown agenda budget, and I how much I think festivals really do matter in terms of being a good avenue to spend CRA dollars for. The last thing that we want after spending a whole big bunch of construction dollars for CRA projects is to end up with sort of islands downtown that there's no people around. And so the festivals that you have sponsored in the past, I think have served the community and the downtown very well. But I won't make a large impassioned speech because I only have 3 minutes. So I'm just going to mention to you there is money in your budget to do this. There's $120,000. My suggestion is that maybe you take half that and do a limited festival competitive process this year to let large and small events have an opportunity to compete for that. If you've decided from a policy matter that you really just don't want to do festivals with CRA funds, then it asks that you maybe give us some kind of a transition year to allow these events that have kind of grown to depend on this to some degree to continue to operate. So I'm very proud of what we've done at Word of South. We've gotten some regional and national recognition. Our attendance has grown every year. I think it's really something that the city and community can be proud of. But this isn't just for us. I mean, I think there are a lot of other entities that have received this money and should continue to receive it. So happy to answer any questions, but thank you for your consideration.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Next speaker.
Thank you. We have Mr. John C. on item number 501, name and address for the record, followed directly behind him, Ms. Annie Harris on item number 301.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
The deal with the CRA and Southside was good enough when Big Ben wanted financial assistance, and my thought it should remain the same now. In regards to having and listening to 2 advisory committees is one thing, ignoring recommendations is another, and the latter seems to be the norm. Rob Renzi says he's willing to honor the original agreement. That should settle the matter. I don't know why we are debating it. The fact that there is a farmer's market on the south side does not negate using the land for other purposes that benefit the south side, not an outside nonprofit for-profit group. We certainly can see how the community redeveloped black businesses right out of Frenchtown, and I think we should take note of that. Thank you.
Next speaker.
Good afternoon. I'm Annie Harris, 436 West Georgia Street in Frenchtown. I'm here on behalf of the Southside Festival as well as the Frenchtown Festival. Altamise couldn't be here today. She sent a letter, but I know how hard that work is. I did the Frenchtown Heritage Fest 5 years in a row, and honest to God, it's a killer when you have to do that by yourself. So I'm saying no way in the world we should eliminate that. I want you to put it in a regular basis into the perpetual budget to be funded in a way each year. It has started other kinds of activities in the neighborhood, such as small businesses. The Heritage Fest, is the hub it supports, and the numbers are increasing. So we ask that you continue to support it in a financial way and make that one of the financial pieces each year as part of the budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Thank you,
Next speaker I have is William Tucker on agenda item number 501, followed by William Crowley on agenda number 502. Name and address for the record, 3 minutes.
Good afternoon, board members. My name is William P. Tucker. I live at 2802 Primrose Lane, Tallahassee, Florida, 32301. I'm also the chairman of the Political Action Committee for the Tallahassee branch of the NAACP. I'm also here representing the president of the NAACP chapter here in Tallahassee, Delatro Hollinger, and his views are the same as mine. I am very much involved with the Tallahassee branch of the NAACP to get out the vote during the upcoming general election. Therefore, I do not need the distraction of a possible CRA threat to the ability of the South Side and Frenchtown communities to have their concerns addressed. The CRA staff recommendation to let Big Ben carriers keep land on the Wallace Street that Big Ben carriers agreed to give up in exchange for $1.5 million in aid to build its South Monroe clinic is a cruel example of bait and switch. For several reasons, the agreement that you carefully consider the Greater Frenchtown Southside Advisory Councils vetoed unanimously to oppose the staff's recommendation. They vetoed this. They agreed to oppose this. Yet it's still before you. CRA Director Roxanne Manning public statement that, quote, Florida statutes don't require advisory committees, that's an astonishing statement, is an affront to the heartfelt aspirations of the South Side and Frenchtown communities. This implies that the Citizens Advisory Council recommendations can be ignored by Ms. Manning and her staff. What is the sentiment of the CRA board? Are you willing to consider the Citizens Advisory Council's recommendation, or are you going to stand on Ms. Manning's implication that the Citizens Advisory Council, which you created, has no legal standing? I strongly recommend that you reject the CRA staff's recommendation and hold Big Ben cares to the agreement it entered into as a condition for your awarding the $1.5 million it used to build its clinic. Therefore, there are no negative consequences to your rejecting Ms. Manning's recommendations, since BBC Director Bob Renzi has agreed to abide by your decision. To decide to let Big Ben get out of the agreement in spite of opposition.
Your time has expired.
Okay, I'm one more second. Is a difficult thing, and we're still trying to get Southside voters to come out and vote, and this does not help them get over such apathy. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Thank you. The next speaker we have is William Crowley, followed by Dr. Hollyfield, and then Ann Bitley-Meyer. Name and address for the record, please, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Hello, my name is Will Crowley. I live at 326 West 8th Avenue in Tallahassee, Florida. I am a proud graduate of Florida State University, but I'm not talking football this week. I come before you all today to talk about two important issues, transparency and local control of our communities. I'm concerned, I am an active participant in our local government. I try to keep informed, but I only found out about some of these issues a couple of days ago, and I specifically 501 and 502. I think they're going to have some potentially very big impacts on our communities, and I would urge you to consider postponing a decision on these two items so that citizens like me and my neighbors and my friends that value this city can have some time to think about it and study these effects. You're looking at some big, valuable properties on the Wallace Street properties that could be retained, that the value of which should not be so quickly given away. The value of these properties could very well increase significantly over the next several years. And frankly, we will have 3 new commissioners sitting on this board in fewer than 60 days. And I believe that decisions like these 2 in particular, 501 and 502, are too big and significant to rush into a decision that could very likely not be supported by the incoming commissioner. So again, I would urge you to please consider postponing a decision on 501 and 502. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Next speaker we have is Dr. Hollyfield. Name and address for the record, 3 minutes, followed by Ann Bitley-Meyer and then Jennifer Schaefer.
Dr. Hollifield, Longleaf Court. And I can tell you straight up, this is going to take longer than 3 minutes. So.
You've got 3 minutes, and then
you might
if you want to suggest...
get prepared to turn off my microphone.
I don't mind restarting his time. I interrupted him, but I do want to mention that we do have 3 minutes per speaker.
A unanimous decision? I suspect that Roxanne Manning, who apparently is convinced that I am stupid and refuses to call me doctor, is surprised that I know what unanimous means. But we had some pretty good teachers at Segregated Family High, so I know what unanimous means. It means that none of the people on the French Side, South Side Advisory Committee supports the land grab by Big Ben Cares that would give them land for a pittance taken from the black community to enrich the coffers of Big Ben Cares, led by a powerful leadership Tallahassee white man. And what is the basis of this cozy relationship between Big Ben Cares and the CRA? Is this some kind of leadership Tallahassee chamber fan club? And why would the gang of 3 who lead the CRA staff apparently sabotage the market value of their own land in the black community by placing restrictions on the use in their agreement with Big Ben Cares, dated January 24th, 2017. This was apparently designed to allow Big Ben Cares to buy the land cheaply. The black community already suffers from the fact that the CRA gave $1.5 million to a not-for-profit nonprofit. There will be no tax increment financing because they don't pay no taxes. They don't pay no taxes. Rather, this represents a lose-lose situation for the black community. Now, I asked the city auditor, Joseph M., I can't pronounce his last name, about the absence of fiduciary responsibility in this bizarre agreement between CRA staff and Big Ben Cares, which has never even been voted on by the CRA board or the CRA advisory committee. Furthermore, there are no minutes from that CRA advisory. I've been asking for the minutes of that advisory meeting a month ago and can't get them. They say a recording has been made. Well, you can't hand around a recording. The auditor said that he had no authority to audit the CRA staff agreement with Big Ben Cares. How can this be true? When his predecessor Bert Fletcher, conducted a formal audit of the CRA. I asked the ethics officer, Julie Meadows-Keefe, to investigate the CRA staff agreement with Big Ben Cares. Meadows-Keefe said she had no authority to do so. Apparently, CRA is an entity unto itself that cannot be investigated by anyone, except perhaps the FBI. Meanwhile, Big Ben Cares' Rob Renzi has called me a liar in an email sent to Roxanne Manning. What did I lie about? Did I lie about the cancer-causing contamination found on that property that I reported to EPA, who in turn made them clean it up? Subsequently, Big Ben Cares' Tallahassee police, armed with guns, came after me and threatened me with arrest if I did not leave the property during a ribbon cutting. What is it about white people and institutions that makes
Dr. Hollyfield, thank you for your comments. Your time has expired.
I need another minute. calling.
Mr. Holyfield, if you could wrap it up, please.
Yeah, another minute. So what do they enjoy about calling the police on black people? A black person can be arrested, beat up, and even shot. I and Sylvia Hubbard have been banned from Big Ben Cares for the rest of our lives, which is the same thing that happened to black people during apartheid in South Africa. Growing up in Jim Crow, Tallahassee Memorial Hospital banned me for 17 years.
Thank you.
Now Big Ben Cares has picked up where TMH left off. Another 30 seconds.
Mr. Holyfield, you.
Roxanne Manning refuses to call me doctor. I remind her that she has a constitutional right to call me nigger if she wants. In deference to Ron DeSantos, she has a constitutional right to call me monkey if she chooses. Just as President Obama was required to produce the long form of his birth certificate to prove that he is an American citizen, I am providing with you a copy of my Florida license in the hope that everyone except perhaps Roxanne Manning will be convinced that I am indeed a doctor.
Right, Dr. Holyfield, since you prepare your comments, if you could ensure that they stay within the 3-minute limit, we'd appreciate it. It's respectful not just to the dais, but to those who are waiting to speak.
Well, with all due respect, you can always turn off my microphone like you did once before.
I'm not going to turn your microphone off. I just want you to observe the rules.
Well, I would like to hand over a copy of my Florida license so you know that
you can give it to the clerk. I appreciate it. Next speaker.
Thank you. Ann Bitley Meyer, followed by Jennifer Schaefer, followed by Oliver Hill Sr., and then we'll have 3 additional speakers after that, and then the public comment section of our agenda will be closed.
Mr. Mayor, out of respect for all the speakers that are here today, I know we have a number of those, would you please make sure that everyone keeps order and respects the chamber and the rest of the citizens who are here?
Of course. Mr. Holyfield, please don't pass anything down the dais. If you wouldn't mind, the clerk's desk is over here. If you could pass it there, it'll get to us. Thank you. Next speaker.
Okay. My name's Ann Bidling Meyer, 1920 Harriet Drive. Once again, it seems that the CRA has ignored the Citizens Advisory Committee's recommendations. And advisory committees bring a lot of fresh perspectives and knowledge and good ideas. And I think when it's appropriate, certainly the CRA should not be so quick to disregard citizen input. It seems that there's a lot more to this issue about Big Ben Cares than meets the eye. I would suggest that you postpone making a decision until more information is brought to the table. It seems like there's something lurking around that's not being exposed. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Jennifer Schaefer on agenda item number 601, downtown large event funding. 3 minutes. Name and address for the record, please.
Good afternoon. Jennifer Schaefer, 3054 Shamrock Street North. I'm the executive director of Springtime Tallahassee, and while I am new to the organization, you all do know it's an organization that has had 50 years running the festival downtown, and I'd like to echo Mr. Muschin's sentiments regarding the festivals in the downtown area and your decision to not fund them this year. We rely heavily on this funding, and to not have it does put several aspects of the festival at risk. We're a 3-day festival that brings in, from an economic impact study done in 2015 and 2017 by down in St. Germain's, we bring in between $7 and $9 million from outside Leon County, not to mention the money that we bring in just from the local people coming in to the festival. We have an attendance of around 150,000 on Saturday when we do our parade and our Jubilee in the Park. It's a big event. It's a historical event. Our whole purpose is to promote Tallahassee and its history. And so I would like you to reconsider this funding for all the festivals in the downtown district. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Next speaker, Mr. Oliver Hill Sr., name and address for the record. Agenda item number 502, affordable housing, followed by Matthew Latch, agenda item number 502.
Good afternoon. My name is Oliver Hill Sr. I'm a long-time advocate for public housing and very low-income housing in Tallahassee, Leon County, Florida. The redevelopment of the Orange Avenue apartment complex is a good idea, but a lot of confusion about that particular project among the residents who live there. I've been living there at those apartments for 40-some years. That's a good development. It needs some work. I have been elected to represent all public housing residents in the jurisdiction of Tallahassee Housing Authority in his jurisdiction. You, the city commissioner, created public housing along with the county commissioners. So therefore, you got a responsibility of seeing that public housing or any low-income housing that receives public dollars are managed for the welfare and safety of all low and very low-income citizens in Tallahassee, Florida. Now, it should be some understanding where the residents stand in that neighborhood or any other neighborhood. The regulation says, federal regulation says, that residents should be involved in all aspects of that development or any other development that's going to be developed by the housing authority. Now, I don't think that the residents been given a total fair shake. I didn't like what I heard. The Orange Avenue apartment is not a rundown unit. They're good. They look better than any other low income or better than any other in the city of Tallahassee and will compete with most private individual houses. So let's get that straight on the record. You hearing that from residents who live there and have advocated for public housing and safe and sanitary housing for all poor people in Tallahassee, Florida. Now, I hope the commissioners, before they fund that particular project, does make sure that the people who live there is going to have a fair shake. Because when you put 300 and some units in, mix them with flux of income, you're creating what you had in the 40s. Sooner or later, you're going to have those people moving out.
Mr. Hill, thank you for your comments. Your time has expired.
Did I have?
You could wrap them up, please.
Okay. Those people going to move 20 years from now. Those people going to move, and you're going to have those same houses. You get 3-story apartment, you in trouble. Tampa, Jacksonville, Chicago, California, everywhere you built them, same problem. Let's don't warehouse poor people, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you for the extra minute.
Thank you. Next speaker.
All right, thank you. We have Matthew Latch, agenda item number 502, name and address for the record, followed by Dale Landry, agenda item number 501, and Cynthia Hubbard will be our final speaker, agenda number 501, and that will conclude our public comments on agenda items.
Ma'am, my address is withheld by Florida statute. How would you like me to identify where I live? I live in Southwest Tallahassee. My name is Matthew Latch. Thank you to Mr. Hill Sr. for coming out and trying to convey what he just did. I'm here to ask you to move option 4 on this item, and that will allow you to provide alternate direction to staff. I ask that alternate direction be that you move this item back to the December 13th CRA meeting. I think the repercussions of this agenda item, which should be 2 separate items because it deals with 2 separate CRA programs. It's dealing with the funding transfer to the Orange Avenue redevelopment matching funds, and it also deals with the transfer of funds to the demolition program. So even though these are 2 separate items tied in, I think we would do well to push this back about about 2 months. I think that would be all right for everyone. And I think we could study this issue and come back with something a little bit more involved. And as other speakers have said, new commission is going to be coming in here, and we're not certain what the future outlook of the Orange Avenue redevelopment project will be. So thank you for your time.
Next speaker.
Dale Landry, agenda item number 501, name and address for the record, 3 minutes, please, followed by Sylvia Hubbard, agenda number 501.
My name is Dale Landry, 1940 Nanticoke Circle, Tallahassee, Florida. I don't know, do I call y'all a board or a commission? Where we at? I want to make sure I do respect everybody that's here in the title, so I want to just try to make sure I did that right. Folks, when I was president of the NAACP, one of my first things that I did, reference to the Big Bend Cares, the position of the branch was to stand and oppose. Decision was made to go ahead and fund Big Bend. Agreement was made, and certain things were done to try to correct one of the major issues I had and the NAACP had, was that they were not going to treat the uninsured. But somehow that was fixed in a manner that may be acceptable. But the other part of it was also a part about the provisions that they had an obligation to uphold as a part of the arrangement. I was at home, and it just happened to pop up on my phone at about 12:30 that they were having this thing in this meeting, and it was a discussion about the transfer of the land. I beg you, please make them do what they're supposed to do. Don't waive that. That's all I can do is beg on that part, because that was a strong fight, and that property was supposed to be set aside for the CRA to be used by the Southside, Frenchtown people. The second part of why I'm here is this. When I read that Ms. Manning had made a comment about advisory boards not having to be adhered to, that was problematic for me. Now, I'm not saying that was true, but I want to bring it to you all to investigate that. Ms. Manning had no right making that statement if she made such a statement, because those boards were established by commissions. These are us people that are volunteering to come in and do this work, not getting paid a dime, getting frustrated, getting blood pressure raised. Then to have someone that go publicly and put that in the statement officially, as my state president, Adora Obianwize, often says, the unmitigated gall. I had to get here, because if that's true, she has lost the respect of every advisory board that she could ever work with. And I needed to say that, and I want her to hear me say it, because I got a letter from you, Mr. Mayor, when you appointed me to the Human Relations Council. That clearly distinguished that you needed my voice. You needed my input, just like those people on the CRA and everybody on every board, advisory board. So I'm going to go ahead and close on this note. That's got to be fixed. And that has to be a response from the elected officials to correct that on the record, publicly, as it was done, if, I'm going to go back and make that statement, if that was done. I thank you all for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Our last and final speaker on public comments, agenda item, Sylvia Hubbard, agenda number 501, name and address for the record, and you will have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Sylvia Hubbard, somewhere on the south side. And I just drew up a poster especially for you, Commissioner Richardson. We've been fighting a fight a long time, since the 1800s, and your CRA board is treating us just like slaves. That advisory board told them not to move forward. This is the second time in reference to Big Bend Cares. And I'm going to be like Dale Landry. I'm praying that you people who were elected to office will do the right thing and tell them no, hand that land over like the community board told them, and move forward. And by the way, have any of you even looked at what the CRA gave them to do, outlined in this contract? Have you ever read the contract?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and you can see that they have nothing to actually do to deserve that $1.5 million that you guys gave to them. There's nothing they have to do. There's no standard. There's nothing. You can shake your head all you want to. If you look at the dollars spent on projects given to black people on the South Side in Frenchtown, you will see that the money is not spent on the South Side in Frenchtown. And if it is, it's like the one you just voted down to bring the bureau over. It's not to minority people. It's all to white people. So we're still fighting. You can say all you want to because you're a white woman living in America. I'm a black woman, and I see what you do. I see what you do. Just like this rush to bring this forward and hurry up and get an answer to it, it's nothing but racism. Nobody won't say it, but I will. You can shake your head all you want to. You still a white privileged woman living in America. I'm a black one that have to fight and come up here and argue with you people who we think is going to stand up for us. Amen. And that's not what happened. So always remember, I'm a black woman. Amen. I'm not a white one. So I have to fight for everything I get. And you're just handing the stuff over to this white organization who bar people, who a white gay man had to fight in court to stop this white man from bullying him. Oh, yeah. This is who you give that money to. The very people that he's supposed to serve, he tells them, you're just a number. That's what he says. You can shake your head all you want to. It's documented. I dare any of you to get with Marie Maddox and see some of the things that these people say about that agency. Don't take my word. It's wrong, and there is no way you hand that land to Big Bend Cares, CarePoint, whichever it is. Thank you.
So we're done?
Yes, sir.
Just a few comments. I think we let everybody have their airing of their grievances, which is exactly what this process is about. But I want to respond to a few things. First, and I'll let Ms. Manning address it in her own right if she chooses, but there's not one of us up here that disregards the sentiments or the opinions of advisory boards. In fact, you've heard from this dais repeated comments strengthening the word and the input and the advice of advisory boards. We don't take that lightly. Secondly, there's the comment that is being repeatedly made that because there's an election coming up that for some reason we're all supposed to abdicate our responsibilities and go sit in the corner somewhere and let this system and this process run itself. We were, for those of us who are moving off this commission, we're elected here to serve for 4 years, and that's what we're here to do. We're not here to stop 2 months out. We're not here to stop 2 days out or 2 hours out. We'll serve and we'll make the decisions that come before this body when they come before this body. And if they come to the next commission, then the next commission will have to deal with those. So as for me, we're not shrinking from the responsibility that we have at this table or at any other table that we're charged with having governance over. And then finally, I realize that the rhetoric at the national level and even to some extent in this state has really fallen off the wheels. I mean, it is off the rails. But some of what was said here today, I mean, we can all legitimately disagree on points of public policy. We don't have to name call. We don't have to insult. There are no children on this dais, so we don't need to be lectured to. We don't need to be demeaned. And the respect that you would want is the same respect that we would want and vice versa. I'm real discomforted by, and that's okay. We're allowed to be discomforted, but discomforted by what it feels as a real degradation of our discourse. We can talk and disagree, and we can do so without being insulting and patronizing to each other. You don't want me doing it to you, and I don't want you doing it to me or to any of my colleagues here, and vice versa. So, you know, as this meeting continues and the rest of the public meetings here, state your point. You can make it plain, but your insults have their limits. And we just appreciate that you follow the golden rule, that you treat people like you want to be treated, and we'll respond in kind. I'm going to move the agenda on to now the consent agenda. Is there a motion at all around consent?
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. I'm sorry, Commissioner Miller?
Mayor, I had asked to pull one of the agenda items, the one related to...
Was that 4.03? Or?
Yeah, I think so.
All right, so we're going to move, there's a motion to move consent except for item 4.03. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, no. Motion passes 4-0. Commissioner Miller on item 4.03.
On 4.03, we're reverting back to a situation that we had in the beginning with the CRA where the board was just composed of the city commissioners. And I was going to expect that this was going to go back to basically the same system. I was surprised to see that there was an option to change the way the board leadership was defined earlier. And I wanted to know what the thinking was on the part of staff as to why that was proposed. I believe that the mayor should still, as in the past, should still lead the CRA, and I believe that the pro tem should always be the vice. And I would propose that as an alternate motion.
So moved.
There's a motion and a second on the structure here. If there are no other questions or comments, all those in favor, let me know by saying aye. I'm sorry, Commissioner, 1 second before we take the vote. Commissioner Richardson?
Mr. Mayor, I am comfortable with what staff is recommending. I don't think the mayor should be chair of the CRA board in perpetuity. I think that it should rotate between the mayor and mayor pro tem, because then it gives other commissioners an opportunity to serve in a leadership role. Whether it's me or the others that will be coming on board, it gives them the opportunity to serve in a leadership position and not just a ceremonial position as vice chair. It gives each of us an opportunity to rotate into that position, as the city commission used to do at one point, and the county commission does currently. And so that's why I would support the recommendation of staff and oppose Commissioner Miller's motion.
Commissioner Miller?
Thank you, Mayor. Commissioner Richardson, I can understand. I think that my thinking was that in this day and age, CRAs in general are have been made into a political football. And what I was looking for was consistent leadership and consistent voice, to be able to have that voice be very, very well informed and articulate on the topic of this particular or any CRA. If you wanted to say, I don't know, I don't have an alternative, I gave this some thought, and it's not a death by chocolate type thing for me, but the bottom line is that I really feel that we need consistent voice for the organization.
Got it. Commissioner Ziffer.
Seeing as how, when we were combined with the county, the chairperson's position rotated back and forth between the chair of the county commission and the mayor, I'm in agreement that the mayor, it would be appropriate for the mayor to continue to lead the CRA. It's just that it would be every year instead of rotating back and forth the county chair. As far as the second position, for me, that could be the rotating one, so that person can serve in that capacity as chair when the mayor's not there. But as we know, all our votes are equal. And when it comes to these positions, for the most part, it's running the meeting, particularly with the CRA. The mayor of our city has additional responsibilities, leading lobbying and other things like that, and quite frankly, heading economic development efforts, which seems to me to be appropriate to have the chair as the CRA. So I'm supportive of the motion. I'll continue to keep my second.
Commissioner Richardson.
Well, Commissioner Miller, you talk about a consistent voice. It rotated between the city and county every other year. So that, talking about disparate voices, I strongly feel that it should rotate between the chair and vice chair to give each of the commissioners an opportunity to serve in that role. Like I said, it was the way that the city commission operated until the charter change was made. It's the way that the county commission operates currently. It's the way that the school board operates. I see no reason why the CRA board shouldn't operate in that same fashion and give every board member an opportunity to serve in the leadership role. I just don't see why it should be the mayor in perpetuity, who is only a ceremonial mayor in the city of Tallahassee.
I think I heard you say something different than I understood this to be. You said rotate between the chair and the vice chair.
Yes.
I would be perfectly amenable to that. My concern was that it was just elected year after year after year, and you could have nobody knows who it would be from one time to the next. And I felt
the vice chair rotates every year. It's not the same person. So
what you're saying is the mayor would be there, and then the pro tem would be the vice, and then whoever the commission pro tem would, the next year, that pro tem would move up to the head of the CRA.
Yes.
And then the year after that, the pro tem that year would be vice, and then the next year, the pro tem would, okay.
Right.
I'd feel more comfortable than that, than just having a separate entire election and process. So if that is, is that what I would accept that as a friendly amendment.
Sure. Well, that's
great. I'm pretty agnostic on it.
You have other things to worry about besides this?
But in agreement with the position. All those in favor, let me know by saying aye.
What are we voting on?
The accepted amendment, which is the alternating between the chair and the vice chair.
Well, that's the recommendation of staff.
Well, then that's what we're voting on.
Yes.
If you would just withdraw your motion,
that is not
then that
the
would.
staff recommendation, as I understand.
Staff is the rotating. So how about we understand it the way we do, which is that the chairmanship will rotate between the chair, the mayor, and the vice chair.
Okay.
Alternatively, all in favor, let me know by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion passes 4-0. Thank you, Commissioner. We're now on to item 5.01.
Board members, good afternoon. We're at item 5.01, which is a proposed amendment to the Big Bend Cares Development Agreement. Let me begin by giving you a little bit of history about this project. Back in 2015, the CRA board received a request from Big Bend Cares for assistance with the construction of a much larger treatment facility. In going through that process, they requested $1.5 million for construction. Now, the photograph you have, there it is. If you could scroll down on that, I don't know if you can. Yeah, okay. That slide up there was the site as it existed in 2015. It was a collection of warehouses and different facilities that was badly in need of redevelopment. As we went through the review process, we got some good input from the community, and Dr. Hollifield and some other citizens pointed out that one of the big concerns that they had was that the facility only treated insured people. And what that helped us do was to focus our contribution to that project, and basically what we did was in the recommendation, and that's the binding agreement, the documents that we put forth at that time with Big Bend Cares, we agreed to contribute $1.5 million to build square footage to treat uninsured patients. So that's what we got out of it, and we were extremely happy to do that because we felt it really added a lot to the facility. In return for that, because they're a nonprofit and their property is non-taxable, they asked to give the CRA a piece of property, and you can see it in the lower corner. It's the little red, it's 4 little parcels, a little red piece of property there. That's just over an acre. It's 1.06 acres. They asked if they could give us that property rather than having to pay some, taxable value that they couldn't pay. We agreed to do that, and at the time, we thought it would be a good location for a farmer's market. We don't often get property as part of a deal like this, but it was a good deal for us. The question has been asked, why didn't they just give us money in return? The answer to that is because at the time they were getting ready to build a very large and really sophisticated building, and they needed to keep their money intact so that should their price go up, they'd still be able to build a building. Anyway, we went through the review process. They have built the facility, And the reports that we're getting back are actually, they exceed our expectations in terms of the kind of service that we were hoping to be able to provide to the community. They are treating uninsured patients, and they're doing it at a rate that's much better than we anticipated. They've also formed, I believe, a working partnership with other clinics in the area. Now, we do have Rob Renzi and Dan Taylor, who is the chairman of the CarePoint board, here to answer any questions. But the issue before you today is very simple. They were going to dedicate this property to the CRA, put it in our ownership, and that was fine. And the appraisal at the time that this was being discussed in 2015 was $510,000 as a value for that property. We intended to put a farmer's market there. The city's already built a farmer's market at Smith Williams. We didn't feel that being on South Monroe was the best place to put a farmer's market. So when they came back to us in April of this year and said, listen, we have money, would you be more interested in getting $510,000, which was the appraised value in 2015? Our answer was, from a staff perspective, we probably would, because we can take that money. It is not time limited the way other CRA funds are limited. We can take that money and we can use it right now on a project somewhere in Southside, South City. So that for us is a much better deal. So as part of that request, we have to bring it through the entire process. We have to go to CAC. We have to bring the request to you to see what you want to do. Now, there's been a lot said about what I may or may not said about advisory boards, and I want to clarify that. What I said and actually wrote, the Democrat had a comment in there that had been provided by a citizen that said advisory boards are a legislative requirement. And I felt that it was very important, especially in light of this question, to clarify that. So I wrote the reporter and simply said, they're not a legislative requirement. They're not required by state statute. But the city and the CRA have 2 advisory boards for our districts, because we feel that community input is very important. And I also added, I think verbally, during a discussion, I said there are times, and it is not unusual, for several departments to have a recommendation that may be different than an advisory committee. But it is also our responsibility to make sure we are very clear about what the advisory committee said, what their concerns are, what their issues are. And we have done that in our agenda item, and I'm going to go over that in a second. So, as professional staff, we have a responsibility to make a recommendation. We also have a responsibility to make sure you understand what the advisory committee said. We bring that to you, and that you use all of that material to make your recommendation. And we do this every other month. Other advisory committees and other departments do it as well. So basically, we took this to our CAC, Frenchtown Southside Advisory Committee, and made the presentation. And they had several questions. And they're on page 3 of 4 in your agenda item. But they were concerned that retaining the property wouldn't be consistent with the development agreement. And technically, it's like, yes, that is correct. The development agreement said they would give us this property. However, they're making a new offer now, and you have the option of having funding that you can use immediately. So we're bringing that to you. They were concerned about terms that were in the development agreement that limited the use of the property. That's not unusual. Big Bend Cares was concerned that if they gave the property to the CRA, that we might sell it, and you could put anything on that property that's allowed by the zoning code. And that would include things like tobacco shops or fast food or auto repair, things that are really not consistent with the healthcare facility. So they asked us to put some minor limitations on that, and we agreed to do that. What else? The CAC question. Where's that?
Would you please read those 2 conditions out to everyone? The conditions, word for word, which were put on this agreement.
I don't have the development agreement in front of me.
Well, read the part of your agenda item that lists what those two conditions were, just so everyone will be aware of what they are.
Okay, which page are you referring to?
Page two.
Page two.
Your background.
Yeah, hang on one.
You want me to read it?
No, I think I got it. The board approval, yes, okay. So the use limitations that were agreed to go on the property, automotive service or repair, car washes, retail sale of auto parts, accessories or tires, cocktail lounge, bar, hotel, motel, inn, boarding house, or laundromat, laundry or dry cleaning or retail packaged liquors. And those were the limitations.
By this condition, is that correct?
Pardon me?
Those things are prohibited by this condition.
Yes, by this condition. If
Well, this condition
We can see in order.
no, it doesn't.
follows the land, so no matter who owns it, this condition is there, or is it?
As long as that condition is passed down from buyer to seller, it would be. As long as CarePoint owns the property, then they have the ability to develop, to maintain those limitations. And quite frankly, just from a redevelopment perspective, we don't think that's unreasonable. Those are fair limitations, especially when you're talking about going in next to a healthcare clinic. So anyway.
And number two,
We got to stay in order.
what was the second condition?
Okay, following uses. Yeah, I got it. Following uses.
Just read the whole thing.
Yeah, the following uses shall not be permitted on the property so long as Big Bend Cares or CarePoint remain in control of the property. Medical or dental offices, services, laboratories, clinics, or a retail drugstore. In the event Big Bend Cares sells or transfers all parcels of CarePoint prior to June 28th, 2030, which was at that time, it was the expiration date of the CRA. The restrictions contained in this subsection shall be lifted.
So as long as the Big Bend Cares owns the property, basically it sounds like to me that right now you can't put those things there.
Correct. If the CRA retains ownership of the property, if we obtain it.
You could put medical and dental offices there.
No, we have agreed to those restrictions as well. If we were to sell it to just a regular person, they would be able to go ahead and utilize, I think, until 2030. It's limited up until 2030. After 2030, there are no limitations on it. And you could put whatever is in CU 45 zoning.
Thank you.
Sir, we're not yelling at you. We have to maintain decorum. You had an opportunity to present. You had an opportunity to present. Dr. Holyfield, we're past that. All right, we're going to hear this in an orderly manner, and the commission will take action.
Yeah. Back to what the CAC's concerns were. They were concerned that this allowing Big Bend Cares or CarePoint to retain that property would not be a benefit to the community. And I think that, actually is fairly debatable. They were concerned that Big Bend Cares didn't have any uses at the time, and they asked staff a fair question, what do they want to do with this property? And we didn't have an answer at the time because we had asked Big Bend Cares, and they had no specific plans. So we were unable to answer that question. They also wondered why Big Bend Cares didn't just give us the $510,000 in the first place. And we tried to explain that. It's like at the time they were getting ready to build the large building, and they didn't know if they would have that money available, but they did have this extra land. From a staff perspective, we explained to them that redevelopment agencies, we rebuild areas. That's what we do. And if you look at that site the way it used to look, and you look at it the way it is now, we've got the image up there, that block is redeveloped. Our job there is done. We have a beautiful new healthcare facility that takes care of many, many people, insured and uninsured, in the community. From a CRA perspective, It would be much more effective if we just have the $510,000 that we can use anywhere on the south side, within our district, to do a project that we feel has a greater need. So that's why we're bringing this question to you. It's really up to you. If you decide to retain the property, then we'll take good care of it. And we will wait until the value goes up.
Great. Thank you, Roxanne.
That's it.
Senator Richardson, followed by
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Roxanne, could you tell us what the current value of the property is if we sold it now?
Yes, we had an appraisal done July 18th, I believe it was, by Brown Beavis Appraisers, and the property is valued at $350,000 right now. Big Bend Cares is offering $510,000. We think the restrictions and also the removal of the old building are what lowered that.
Okay. Commissioner Miller.
You said Commissioner
Miller.
Thank you. Can't tell you how glad we are to see you, by the way.
It's good to see you. Back to the old business.
So really, my first question was, why don't we put a farmer's market here?
When we found out they'd built one at Smith Williams, well, first of all, we started looking at the old building, and it had issues, and we discussed that. But the big issue that we could not overcome is that it's sitting right on South Monroe, and the traffic there is brutal, and the building's pretty close to the road. So we started talking at that point among staff about maybe looking for an alternate location. Then we found out that the city had done a successful farmers market at Smith Williams, which is the community center. And we don't want to do anything to compete with that. So the property at that point for us was we weren't as interested in putting a farmer's market there as we had been.
Have we thought about we put thought into other alternatives other than selling the land? So for instance, if the community or the district or the committee, Citizens Advisory Committee, were to spend some time putting some input into what else could work on this parcel short of what we originally thought, if there is an inclination to change from what we originally thought. Has time been taken to absorb what that is?
Actually, there are several different things that are sort of going on right now on the south side in Frenchtown, where we have staff working to develop priorities. If the CRA retains this parcel, it automatically becomes part of that conversation. What can we do with it?
Because aside from us being approached about the sale of this, there is, to me, no other real reason to consider this other than having been asked. That what was already in play has not yet had an opportunity to play itself completely out.
Yeah.
We're here because the property owner has decided, or at least the abutting property owner has decided, that this is valuable land. They'd like to bring it back into the fold and maybe have some control over the future development. But materially, that's no different than what would have been the case when we originally considered the $1.5 million grant in the first place. There were always going to be considerations around what this land would eventually become. There were some thoughts around what it could be, but there is nothing that makes this a ripe consideration for this commission other than an ask.
Correct. That's correct.
I'll just say, I know we're still in conversation, but I'm against sale at this time. I think we ought to give the citizens groups and staff the opportunity to work fully through how we might imagine this land and its use if it remained in our control. Other questions or comments from commissioners? Commissioner Miller, followed by Commissioner
Well, I just
Richardson.
wanted to, I heard the name of Southside Voters brought up to the table today, and since I've spent a great deal of time over the past year trying to figure out how to fund the Frenchtown plan, for example, I am pretty familiar with the fact that money is just not growing on trees around here. And when you have the opportunity to take $500,000 and put it back into programs and back into projects that will help the entire area, I'm wondering how the residents at large would actually feel when they realized that this piece of property was being kept just for whenever, for maybe something in the future, and yet that $500,000 could be working for them while this sits here. And so that's basically how I've looked at this, that because I feel that that money is better invested in the CRA area, in the South Side, in Frenchtown, and that's why I'm going to be supporting this.
Thank you. Commissioner Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Wayne, this might be for you. I know it's just, this is a little bit over a 1 acre parcel. Could anybody talk to us realistically what could be developed on this 1 acre parcel?
That is something that we have taken an initial look at, and I'll let Wayne fill in, but
yeah, Commissioners, the property is zoned Central Urban 45, which allows some pretty intensive stuff. It allows up to 45 dwelling units per acre, a lot of commercial uses. Whatever you do, the agreement that states that certain uses are prohibited, those are things that from the old code that we did not want along that corridor that we thought would be a detraction for the reinvestment that you are putting into the South Side. Keep those in. That is what limits the value of this property when you start restricting the land uses. So anything commercial, office, anything that could serve the needs of that neighborhood that are identified, that's appropriate for that district, but we really want more intense use of that property, not something that's low intensity. So you have the ability to major a corridor. I know traffic may be a concern, but that's what you want along these major corridors is more intense development.
So when you take into consideration then stormwater retention, and that property is on a steep slope, stormwater retention, parking, egress and ingress from South Monroe, realistically, what could be built on that 1 acre parcel that would be a viable business?
In this particular site, you're talking about 20 to 30% of the site that would be taken up with a stormwater management facility. Then you would have required green space. I would say about 50 to 60% of that site could be developed with a building and parking. One thing that makes this attractive from a shared use if Big Bend Cares takes over the property, they have parking areas, they have larger lots and where they could have shared parking, things like that that could intensify that site. In other words, the site wouldn't have to put parking on it. You could put all building, let them share parking with Big Bend Cares. Those are opportunities that Big Bend Cares could utilize and intensify the site. If it's just a standalone parcel, very limited, very limited.
And then, Mr. Mayor, one other question. We're talking about the offer being $510,000 from Big Bend Cares, CarePoint.
3 years ago.
And the property being valued now at, what was it,
$350,000.
$350,000. So if we held on to the property, how long would it take if we're looking at annual increases in the value of the property? How long would it take to get from the $360,000 roughly to the $510,000 that Big Bend Cares, CarePoint is offering us?
And you know, that is dependent on the real estate market, and we did a couple of just quick off-the-cuff estimates. If the market were to be slow and go up at 2%, it would take about 18 or 19 years to get back up to $510,000. If the market went more quickly, which hopefully it will, and you're looking at maybe a 5% increase a year, then you're probably looking at about 8 or 9 years. So it'll take a little while for it to go back up. The other option is we might find a use for it that would better serve the community, but.
Quick question on the use for it that will better serve the community. So I think one of my frustrations about these things when we come back to changing them, particularly so quickly after we adopted them in the first place, is you all had a vision around what you thought this parcel could be used for when you originally negotiated it into it. If it had no value, then we got the short end of the stick when it came to negotiating this as part of why we would have incentivized the development at $1.5 million. I reject that it didn't have value and good use for the community. I'm just suggesting that if what we're now sort of simplifying this down to is well, it's worth $300,000 today, and in 18 years it may be worth $5. I don't buy that math. I think we know better than that based off of what development trends have been. I'm simply saying, and I'm not saying that at some point it didn't make sense to sell it. I don't know that, but what I don't favor is short-circuiting the planning process and the imagining process for why we took these properties in the first place for public use, and now we're responding to a request by the owner to basically sell it, right? That you said that there are a lot of things that are happening right now on the south side, a lot of planning, and if we don't sell it, this will be included in it. Is that what, those were your statements a moment ago?
I'm not sure exactly I said that, but I said there are a lot of different, there are some planning efforts that are going on the south side. If we retain this property, we would have the opportunity to utilize it for something that comes out of that process.
Same thing. We're saying the same thing.
I think so.
We are. There's planning that's happening, and that if this land does not get sold, that it will be a part of whatever that planning is, and whatever recommendations take shape, this will be a part of it.
Yes.
Right. So what I'm simply saying is I would prefer, much rather, since we negotiated this land for that purpose, for that planning to take its own shape. There is no imperative. Land is non-renewable, which means it only gains value. Right? We're not losing anything by waiting for that to run its course.
All right.
Why would we short-circuit it at this time other than having been asked to?
Well, we're not really short-circuiting it. We just have to bring the request to you.
I get it, but it came with a recommendation.
Yes. Oh, yes, we have to.
It's not just a request to us. It came with a recommendation. We're not arguing here. I'm simply trying to establish that you all negotiated this land as a part of the $1.5 million incentive money we gave for CarePoint. I think they're doing great work. This is not an indictment on what they're doing. I think their contributions are great. I want to see the planning process continue, and I want to hear what you all recommend, on the parcels of land that we negotiated into this agreement. I'm not interested, and I don't think there's an imperative right now into selling that and to short-circuiting that planning process. That's less an argument for you and really for us to debate. Commissioner Ziffer.
Because I think this brings it in for a landing because I can count. I think, and I agree with the mayor on this, the farmer's market had some appeal. Number one, there was a need. The second thing was, as time went by, there may not be as much of a need and we wouldn't have a terribly significant investment in the property, and therefore it could become something else. So I'm in agreement, and that is, let's give ourselves a little bit of time here to figure out, the farmer's market didn't come to fruition, but maybe there's something else that does. The one thing that we've learned from Frenchtown is that when land gets gobbled up, you can't get it back. So I can count to 2 here, so I'm going to call the question. Is there a motion?
I don't think there is, Commissioner.
Mr. Mayor.
Commissioner Richardson.
First of all, I want to make it abundantly clear that this is not an indictment of Big Bend Cares or CarePoint.
Not at all.
They are a legitimate business in this community. They are providing an important healthcare function to the citizens of this community, those who are uninsured, underinsured. The development that they've done on the south side of town, where I have lived for the past almost 25 years now, and I don't need to be lectured by anybody. I was born in 1956. I grew up in the segregated South. So I don't need to be lectured by anybody about black people and fighting for the black community. I've done that my entire adult life. And I resent being lectured by anybody. I'm not a child to be lectured. If we want to have a discussion along those lines, we can do that. But I'm not going to sit here and be lectured by anybody. So I want to make it abundantly clear that I support Big Bend Cares and CarePoint and what they have done for the community. I don't know that there is a rush to sell the property. I agree with you, Mr. Mayor, and that's why I asked Wayne the question, to give us an idea now on a limited parcel of land, what could reasonably be put there, given the topography of the land that it's on, and an incline or downhill property with the requirements of stormwater retention and parking. But if we don't feel currently that we have adequate information to make that decision on, I don't have a problem with delaying the decision. But it is clearly not, in my mind, an indictment of CarePoint and Big Bend Cares. They are there. They're providing services to the citizens of this community, and I welcome them where I live. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Commissioners, I think we're in order for a motion, and if
I would make the motion, Mr. Mayor, that we delay that we not accept staff recommendation on this item.
Got it. So the motion is to reject staff recommendation. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion passes unanimously.
And Mr. Mayor, I don't know that I would need to make another motion. Well, let me see because I didn't see the options because typically you all give us an option to give you direction. I think you've probably ascertained what our direction is.
We did, yes, from your motion. Your motion is the direction.
Okay.
And to your point, one thing I wanted to bring up, mostly really for the audience, as I know you're already familiar with this, I had mentioned earlier there's a lot of good work going on in both Frenchtown and Southside with planning staff and the Neighborhood Affairs Group from the City of Tallahassee, working with the residents to determine the needs for the community and set those priorities. The first presentation for that will be held this afternoon at the City Commission meeting, and I just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention because that is going to be an important way that the CRA sets our priorities for funding, and this property can go into that as well. But, to talk about the future and how we'll set our priorities, it's hearing from these community groups that are working with city staff to identify the real needs and priorities. So it's an important issue, and I just encourage everybody to pay attention to it.
Right. Thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
I want to make a comment about this too. I think that actually more than one speaker had referenced that this came along so fast, and honestly, not only have we all been following along for the last 3 years, we've all been listening to public comment for these number of years. We've all been reading our agenda materials. We've all been studying the property. We've been to the property. We've looked at the property. We've watched the project come out of the ground. The CRA staff has worked to meet the needs of uninsured people at this facility when in the beginning that was not going to happen. And the CRA is one of the most heavily regulated and transparent based on the reporting requirements in state statute that exist in this government. This agency is governed by state statute, not by city ordinances or local government. They are governed by state statute, and so when one of our staff basically says what state statute said, I don't think that person deserves to be ridiculed and reprimanded and investigated and audited. It's just a simple matter of the fact that this organization is regulated by the state, and their requirement is to meet the state requirements. That I want to be clear about that. But I feel today in listening that there is a larger body of residents that are involved in this, that are residents of the CRA. They deserve some consideration, and a lot of the comments are because people are angry at Big Bend Cares and they just don't want them to have control of this property. That's been clear from the beginning. But to deny the residents of the entire area access to programs they need just so an acre of land can sit there unused for who knows how long, I just don't think that this context of this conversation has really been based on the value to the residents themselves. And I am, as you know, I voted for this motion. I'm perfectly happy. In fact, my entire reaction to the first read of the agenda item was no, because I wanted the farmers market there. I felt that it would be more accessible. And it was only when it was made clear that basically there's not enough space there to really do a very good job that I began to have a little bit broader view of the topic. But I'll stop there. But I think that at some point, we have property over on Macomb Street that's been sitting in public ownership for years and years and years. That doesn't do anybody any good. So we can sit around and be land speculators all day long, but it really isn't. Our duty is to help the residents in these areas, and letting land sit unused is not the best way to do that. So I'm hoping that everyone, new commissioners, old commissioners, staff, all get the message that what we really want to hear is, what do you want to do with this property? What do you want to do there? And I don't think a single speaker addressed that question. So please begin to give that some thought.
Thank you, Commissioners. We're now on item 5.02.
Commissioners, getting used to the new system here. 5.02 is a request to transfer $425,625 in CRA Affordable Housing Fund to the City of Tallahassee's Affordable Housing Trust Fund to be used as a local government match for a low-income housing tax credit application by the city to the Florida Housing Finance Corporation for the Phase 1 redevelopment of the Orange Avenue apartments. Phase 1 development includes the construction of 100 senior housing units at an off-site location from, hopefully it's up here. So this map here shows an overlay of the existing Orange Avenue apartments on the bottom side of the map. On the top side of the map is the proposed Magnolia senior housing development that will be part of the Orange Avenue redevelopment. The idea is to move the senior units up to a new site, which would then allow the other parcels in the property to be redeveloped without impacting and having to move people out of the redevelopment. Would allow them to move from one phase to another as the project is redeveloped.
Just out of curiosity, the senior housing that you want to move, and this may be for Ms. Williams, but for the seniors that are currently in the Orange Avenue apartments, are they clustered right now, or?
About a third of the residents that live at Orange Avenue are seniors. About a third. But
they're dispersed throughout the property.
And they're dispersed throughout the property.
So you'd have to relocate.
Those that want to move to the senior facility would have that option. Those that don't want to move can stay right there on site.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
So, Commissioners, the action is the request to you. And of these units, we're going to have 100 units. 95% of those will be for low-income or moderate to low-income housing. And I guess I'm going to point out Michael Parker and Brenda, as you already talked to, are here today, as is the developer from Columbia Residential, to answer any questions you might have about the project overall.
Commissioner Ziffer, followed by Commissioner Richardson.
I just want to be clear that whoever currently lives there will have a place to live there once the redevelopment is complete.
Yes. By law, the Housing Authority is required to offer every resident the opportunity to return to a new unit, a newly built unit.
It will be as affordable as it currently is?
Yes.
I'll move the item.
Second.
Is there a second? There's a motion and a second on the item. Commissioner Richardson.
Ms. Williams, could you talk about the amount of public input that was taken before renderings were made for this project?
Yes. Thank you for the opportunity to address that. Last year, the Housing Authority set forth a planning effort to prepare a master plan for the Orange Avenue corridor between Adams Street and Blairstone. The planning process took about 8 months. During that 8-month period, there were about 9 meetings that were held. Those meetings consisted mostly of residents at Orange Avenue. We can document the number of residents who participated in the planning process. We didn't hear any confusion from any of the residents that participated. Matter of fact, the plan itself was crafted based on what came out of those meetings. And it's well documented that the plan reflects what the residents at Orange Avenue who participated in those meetings asked for.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. I'm done with the questions.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, but I'm going to support the motion. I support it wholeheartedly. This is a project that I have championed from the very beginning. I attended many of those community forums where residents and citizens from the general Southside area were given the opportunity to have input into the project, which led to the final rendering that we see and the plans for phasing in the new development. We're talking about an apartment complex that's every bit of 40 years old. I've been in Tallahassee for 45 years myself, and the Orange Avenue apartments were there when I moved here. There is no central air, no central heating and air in the apartments. There are constant repairs that have to be made. The lead pipes that are there often break, and that sewage runs across the complex, and that has to be repaired. There is no locations for washers and dryers. People are still hanging clothes on clotheslines like we did when I was growing up in my little hometown of Green Cove Springs. And so, yes, there is clearly a need. This will be transformational for the south side of Tallahassee and the other developments that are going on along that Orange Avenue, Blairstone Road corridor. There are housing complexes that are going up now. We've got the VA clinic. The Capital Regional Medical Center is going to put a standalone emergency room at the corner of Capitol Circle and Orange Avenue. The Super Stop at Meridian and Orange Avenue is going to be one of our priority projects for Blueprint. So this, to me, will be transformational for the south side of Tallahassee and will, in fact, encourage additional development in addition to the police, the law enforcement campus that's scheduled for the south side as well. But this will be transformational for the south side of Tallahassee in encouraging additional low-income, affordable, and market-rate housing and commercial development in this area. I've seen it work in places like Tampa. I hear that it's the same way in Atlanta, and I'm sure other municipalities that I haven't had an opportunity to visit. And so I wholeheartedly support this effort and support the motion to provide them with the funding that they need to take advantage of some additional funding from the Florida Housing Finance Authority that will help expedite even the schedule of completion of this project, Mr. Mayor.
Great. Thank you so much, Commissioner, and I couldn't agree more, well, except I have to stand for clotheslines. My mother still has them. I don't want her to think I'm talking bad about clotheslines. But as it relates to your point around the transformational impact, I think you're completely right. And moreover, and Commissioner Zifford, this harkens back to something that you talked about several months ago, our need for senior affordable housing is off the charts. You have seniors who are on fixed incomes who, because frankly, we're a little bit of a renter's market here, are not able to get access to accessible and affordable housing on their fixed incomes. And so I think this is a seminal entry into the redevelopment of this area, and so glad to see that you're prioritizing seniors as an original part of this, as a first start to it. So, Commissioners, there is a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor? I'm sorry. Before we take the motion, Commissioner Miller.
Does that motion include option 1 and option 2?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes. All those in favor of the motion, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion passes unanimously. Commissioners, we're now into item 5.03.
Okay, I'm going to give a brief.
Second.
Whoops, thank you.
It's a great item. We read it.
It is a great item, actually, yes.
You are Rexon, yes. There is a motion and a second on the item. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion passes unanimously. We're now on to item 5.04.
Move the item.
There is a motion and a second to approve the item. Seeing there are no questions from the dais, all those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion passes unanimously. Commissioners, we're now on to item, the Downtown District Policy Formation, item 6.01.
Good afternoon, Commissioners and Mayor.
Good afternoon.
Item 6.01, this agenda item seeks board's direction on two different issues. The first issue includes an increase in the amount of reimbursable amphitheater support expenses, and the second issue is whether to provide fiscal year 2019 funding for small and large events in the downtown district. So regarding the first issue, in increasing the amphitheater support dollars, in March of this year, the board approved up to $125,000 for amphitheater support funds due to the loss of the Meridian Point building. Eligible events would be reimbursed up to $10,000 per event, while the amphitheater support dollars are intended to lessen the fiscal impact to these organizers. It does not intend to cover all of their expenses. However, staff does realize that related expenses may be more than originally expected. And with this, staff is recommending increasing the maximum amount per event from $10,000 to $15,000. However, maintaining the overall $125,000 for the total over support for the amphitheater support funds. This increase would be sufficient to cover all expenses through fiscal year 2019. And for the second issue of concern is the support of the small and large events in the downtown district, where we have received several comments this afternoon regarding the increase of those funds. At your July meeting, the board did not approve any event funding for the fiscal 19 small or large events. And this was mainly due to the limited cash flow in the downtown district. The limited cash flow is due to the Capital Cascades public parking garage payment, which the CRA is seeking a bridge loan of $600,000. This $600,000 will allow us to have cash flow in the proposed 2019 budget. Although the budget does include approximately $127,000 in uncommitted funds for unexpected expenditures in fiscal year 19, this $127,000 represents a balance of the bridge loan funds from the city. Because of this, staff is not recommending approving grant funds for the large and small events in the downtown district for fiscal year 19. However, if you choose to fund these events, we ask that you do not go over the approximately $127,000 that would be available. But we also ask that you consider waiting until after our final values have been received from the Leon County Property Appraiser's Office to determine whether we can fund large and small events in the downtown district. And with that, I can here to answer any questions you may have.
Commissioner Miller?
Thank you, Mayor. You know, we've all heard I've seen a lot of writing about the CRA in the press, and what I've been saying all along is that over the years, probably 200 people have come in contact with the CRA, or at least 200, and I think we have a dozen programs, and even only one of those programs is actually the one that gets all the attention, and maybe 6 different of the 200 allocations or program participation or money that's been distributed is what you hear about. A lot has changed in the CRA districts over the years, and those districts became CRA districts because they were labeled as blighted and need of attention. Wonderful things have happened. One of the wonderful things is the Frenchtown Heritage Fair that you heard about today, and actually the Hub. Those are 2 wonderful things that have happened. People are beginning to travel to these downtown areas who may not have been inclined to do so in the past. One of the ways to get them downtown to see the changes are through the festivals. And I think that it's a small amount of the budget, and yet it has a tremendous impact in the fact that it is the only thing that we do, really, that tries to get people to come and visit the CRA areas. And so I've been supportive of these all these years, partly because of, back to the Frenchtown Heritage Fair, I was there and saw how difficult it was, you know, for Ms. Harris to get this going, and the work she put in, and organizations like that, when you're trying to start something, you need a little bit of a boost, and a couple $1,000s is a windfall, honestly, to get these things started, and that's how they do get started. So in addition to that, I wanted to point out that this is a particularly difficult and challenging year for anybody who uses the amphitheater, and if anybody doubts that, they should go to the amphitheater and see, and just pretend that you and your band were coming there to try to perform. There is virtually no backstage available, and that's a condition that's going to go all through next year. So the program was set up to try to mitigate that with the groups that are performing there, and I think that's worthy. We all supported that. But at some point, it needs to be pointed out that these organizations are facing more than just this being cut off, this source of income. We talk about sustainability for the groups, and that we talked about this at the Tourist Development Council the other day. Groups need to develop sustainability plans. They shouldn't be dependent on, et cetera, et cetera. Well, how do you do that when you don't know from one year to the next whether you'll get an allocation from the Tourist Development Council or from COCA or from the CRA, which is basically where those public money dollars come from? So I think that Commissioner Mushton's suggestion that there's at least a transition this year, and at least I don't begin to suggest it's $120K that we put toward this, but I do think that maybe somewhere up in the vicinity of 75 made available to these organizations so that they can meet some of these pressing demands that they're having to face from every direction, it seems.
Do you want to make that in the form of a motion?
I will make that a motion.
Is there a second?
Can you just bring that down, because there are a couple different parts, if you could.
The 75, you want to describe that?
75,000?
Yes, and if you want to put competitive restrictions on this somehow, I mean, you know, I don't know. I didn't write the agenda item. I mean, I read it, obviously, but the fact is that I just don't think that cutting people off completely right at this point is good for the community or good for the organization's viability over time. And trying to get these groups through this, I'm very concerned about trying to get them through this time period where they're also trying to figure out how to even manage the people that they invite here to perform. So
I'll second that for discussion.
Right. Just out of curiosity, was part of this trying to get more activity into the amphitheater, or
in terms of providing the $125,000?
Just expanding it at smaller intervals to more organizations? Because I believe in events as a way to help make the district vibrant, and sometimes it's particularly for startup ones, it's harder to sustain or even start up one if you don't have some resources to get it going. So my concern is twofold. One, as Commissioner Miller points out, I think we should be careful not to snatch the rug from underneath folks. I mean, if there's a transition, then let's figure out how that works. But I also would like to see event-based funding exist, you know, over perpetuity, and I think that comes down to how we sort of draft and develop this budget. But I'm trying to understand the motivations for going smaller in the first place and tying it to the amphitheater.
Well, there's two things at hand here. We have small downtown events that were not funded because of the downtown budget restrictions, and the same thing happened with the large events. So the large events were funded at $100,000 last year. That was a completely separate budget for large events. And then the small events were funded at $35,000 last year, which was a separate event. So because of the limited funds we had for the downtown district, in July we came to you all and said, our funds are limited in downtown, so we had a deficit, so we did not seek out funding for those small and large downtown events because of the deficit we were looking at in the downtown district.
So you then just looked at small?
We looked at both small and large, not just small. So in the greater Frenchtown South Side, you allowed us to approve funding for that. So there are small events in the greater Frenchtown South Side, but there's no event funding for any of the downtown district events currently.
Right. Commissioner Ziffer.
And there's another part to this item. There were a couple of events that last year even exceeded 15,000, as I think, for example, Word of the South was close to 20,000.
Yes, for the amphitheater support funds, they were looking for about 19.6 for this year.
And there was another one that spent more than...
And there's one that was Southern Shakespeare. They've already received about $8,000 in amphitheater support funds. And then Scott's Carswell for a concert with the county is looking for about $7,000 in amphitheater support funds.
I don't want to have a situation, because they have to go through this again this year, correct?
Yes, sir.
Because it's not ready. And what you're dealt with was the actual funding of the event, not the reimbursable expenses. So I would, for those two organizations, for Southern Shakespeare and for Word of the South, allow them up to 20,000. Those are substantial events for our community. And so I would make an amendment to include those two at 20,000 reimbursable.
Is that acceptable, Commissioner?
Yes.
All right. Commissioner
What I want to be clear on, though, is, you know, are we still saying that these funds are going to be time limited? Or is this going to be in perpetuity that we provide this?
It's just this 1 year that we're voting on at this point.
As transition funding?
And so for clarification for staff, for $20,000 for Southern Shakespeare and for Word of South for this year, and starting fiscal year 19, are we going back to the maximum of 15,000?
I think for those two...
For those two, it'd stay at 20,000?
I'm assuming they're probably going to have the same level again. Those two would be 20,000 again. But that's just to get them through this transition phase until the new facilities are available to them.
Okay.
Great. There is a motion and a second on the item as amended. All those in favor of the motion, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion passes unanimously. Commissioner
Just a question for staff. So then the funding that Ms. Harris requested earlier for the Frenchtown Festival and the, what do they call it? The
Walk Through Living History?
Yes. There is funding for both of those events?
Yes, sir.
In the budget?
In the budget. There's currently funding for the Greater Frenchtown Southside Small Events of $50,000, and both of those events have applied. However, there is language in the guidelines for the small events that if they have received funding for 5 years or more in their 6th year, which this would be the 6th year for the Heritage Festival and the Living History, in their 6th year, their funding is reduced by 50%. So, and then after 6 years, they're no longer eligible for funding.
Okay, so their funding then is being...
If they're awarded funding this year, it'll be reduced by 50%.
Okay. So I'm not sure that they're going to be able to have those events, though, at a 50% reduction in funding.
So, because right now...
And that's for the commission. That's a question for...
Budgeting.
What is that dollar amount? Do we know?
Right now, they're requesting $5,000, and so it will be reduced to $2,500.
And that's
for fiscal year 19.
5,000 for each?
5,000 per event.
Per event.
Right.
Commissioners, this was based on discussion and board direction from a few years ago. Unlike the downtown, it's not a budgetary issue. If you want to go back to full funding, which is only $5,000 per event, you can do so without a negative impact on the budget. This is for Frenchtown Southside.
I would make that motion.
I would second.
There's a motion and a second on the motion. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion passes unanimously.
And just a point of clarification, there are actually 2 other events that would be impacted by this, so I would imagine that would apply to all 4 of those events.
What are those other 2?
The other 2 is shops and is Mardi Gras that they have at the Railroad Square, and then there's the, I can tell you in just a moment, I'm sorry.
I don't think we're picking those.
The Tallahassee Film Society, which is film series.
Yeah, I think the motion is without regard to the content.
Okay.
Right.
Got it.
Wait. Now, the motion is in regards to all of them?
And that's my question.
Well, if not, we should go back and change it, but my vote was in favor of the category being expanded back to 5,000.
That is, which means that it would apply to everyone.
To what's in it,
What I
correct.
voted for.
And I made the motion before we knew about the other two organizations, so I would withdraw that motion.
We've already voted on it, so we would need to have someone in the affirmative.
All right, Mayor, as I move the mayor's suggestion that this.
It is,
go
it's
back
already,
to-
that is what the motion is. I think that's what we passed. If you disagree with that, then
I
you
don't
can.
disagree with that.
No, if anyone does. I think
That's to include the other two organizations?
that's correct.
Okay, yeah. I'm
Okay,
good.
great. Thank you, Commissioners. I appreciate y'all working through that with us. Commissioners, we're now on item 7.01, Management and Oversight of CRA.
I'll move option 1.
Second.
There's a motion and a second on option 1. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion passes unanimously. Commissioners, we're now at the point in the meeting where we will hear from speakers that were not agenda. Are there any speakers? There are none. Is there any other business to come before this body at this time? Seeing none, we stand in adjournment. Thank you all.
We have the